Hi everyone, I'm Vasanth and I'm joined here today by Ravi, who is on our ML team, and we've got some exciting topics to discuss around LLM as a judge. But maybe really quick, Ravi, if you want to give a quick introduction about yourself and your background and the overall team.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Vasanth. My name is Ravi. I've been working on the ML team for about maybe a year and a half, coming up to 2 years. And I've mostly been working on things like focused around, faster inference, and topics like alignment. And today, I guess one of the topics we're going to be talking about is LLMs-a-judge.
Yeah, awesome. So, why don't we just dive right into it? And can you just maybe start by setting the context and frame around what is LLM as a judge as a concept, and how it's typically used?
Yeah, let me sort of step back and sort of set the stage. So typically how LLMs are kind of evaluated, there are sort of two formats. So one format is something called an automatic benchmark. So these are things like MMLU, and other benchmarks like BPH, where you basically have, it's either like a multiple choice question or a text summarization where you have generally the reference answer, and basically you can have some sort of infra to basically check, whether the answer outputted by your LLM is correct or not. So that's one style of evaluation. These have their uses, but because of how rapidly LLMs have been, kind of developing, potentially there's some risk of te test set contamination. So people not the alt. So basically, you need the second, I guess, a part of what I was talking about before, which is human evaluations. And
Mhm.
the idea behind a human evaluation, which is typically done through these kind of A/B tests, are you basically ask, two LLMs, where one is the model that you want to test, and the other one is will be basically like a reference. And you basically have a set of prompts, and you send those prompts to each of the models, and then you collect those responses, and you show those collective responses to different human evaluators, and you basically ask them whether they prefer one model over another model, or if they're about the same.
Mhm.
So so typically this is right now seen as sort of the gold standard in LLM evaluation. The problem with human evaluations, though, is that one, it is very costly to set up, and two, it's not very scalable, in the sense that you basically need a lot of evaluators to really see some sort of statistical signal, when, let's just say, it's sort of when like the models are of equal quality.
Sure.
So um, basically to sort of help automate that process, what we can do is, we can, instead of using a human um, as an evaluator, we can use an LLM to basically act as the judge, and basically, depending on a particular rubric or criteria that you define, you can basically kind of automate that process, and as a proxy, it becomes cheaper.
Right. And obviously, um, that opens up a whole bunch of separate questions. But it sounds like maybe first and foremost, we're doing this primarily as for efficiency, right? It's not. Maybe give us a context of like how many prompts are typically run, and how many people are needed typically if we're just purely doing human evaluation.
So, it's a pretty tough question. I think in terms of a human evaluation, I mean, typically you want at least probably somewhere between 20 to 30 participants in order to like really kind of see, even begin sort of that conversation of us seeing like some sort of a statistical signal. And in terms of the number of prompts, this also can vary. I mean, typically the more prompts you have in your evaluation set, obviously the better it is. But there's also a trade-off there where if you have too many prompts and you're basically showing those all those prompts basically to the human evaluators, they begin to actually get fatigued
Hmm.
when they actually choosing which model is better. For example, consider if you're sending a prompt which is sort of a has kind of a longer context. It's going to be fatiguing for the human to basically read through all of that and then the LLM responses and then basically to choose one of them. So we kind of have to be intentional in sort of choosing, what prompts do we want to actually include in our evaluation set so that we sort of get a fair, sort of unbiased kind of judgment from the humans.
Would you say it's on the order of magnitude of like 100 prompts on average, or tens of prompts?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely on the order of hundreds of prompts. So a popular benchmarks they can range anywhere from like 500 prompts to 800 to about 1500.
So, given that it's not really scalable for humans to do this, we're trying to automate with LLMs. Uh, Probably one of the immediate questions that comes up is typically people always think of LLMs as these things that have a tendency to hallucinate them. They themselves aren't very accurate. Um, is accuracy a concern when it comes to leveraging an LLM as a judge to help automate this process?
Yeah, so I think it depends on sort of, I guess, from like which audience is basically trying to evaluate, whether the LLM is sort of quote unquote accurate or not. So, from my personal experience, in terms of trying to understand, whether LLM is accurate, uh, for like a general lay person or maybe like your
Hmm.
kind of human evaluator, the LLM typically will have more in-depth domain knowledge about a particular topic. So, for example, if we're talking about like asking GPT-4, for example, to evaluate, whether like how to write this dynamic programming algorithm, um, your typical human evaluator may not know even what that is.
Hmm.
And so from that perspective, the LLMs are very, very accurate. From a person who is like in the field, who is an expert, typically they will have way, way more knowledge than the LLM, and they'll be able to basically critique, they're this the GPT-4 gave a pretty naive algorithm. There's a better way to do it. So it's sort of hard to evaluate. It's sort of hard to judge. It depends on who is actually kind of running the evaluation and who the actual human evaluators are to basically say if it's quote unquote accurate or not. But in my personal experience, generally GPT-4 and sort of the LLMs which are used in these LLM as a judge frameworks typically tend to give pretty good reasoning.
So let's talk since you mentioned the models, let's dive a little bit into that. So it sounds like GPT-4 is typically commonly used as a judge in this case. What makes what I guess what are the common models that you would want to judge? Is it typically fine-tuned models for a specific use case? And if that's the case, like is a large foundation model like a GPT-4 the best option, or would it make sense to go and fine-tune judges uh to help run this benchmarking and evaluation?
Yeah, so in terms of what you would use kind of the LLM as a judge framework for, in the past, what I've typically done is I've used it mostly for sort of evaluating kind of the chat quality of the model. because that's sort of I mean, if trying to figure out which model is better than another one in a chat setting is sort of a kind of even an ill-defined sort of problem. And so you would want to use, like a strong model, I guess, to figure out, is the style of one model better than another one? And you can also like apply these to like, your specific use case or your specific domain. For example, if you're interested in just like medical domain, um, you can basically prompt GPT-4 to act as some sort of like medical expert or something. And then it'll basically tailor its responses to basically fulfill that kind of request. Now, coming to the second part of your question, is it better to kind of use GPT-4 or can we like fine tune judges? Right now, that's actually an open research question. So there are some I believe papers which have explored, looking at trying to create sort of models which are exclusively for judging. And I think there like for how much research has gone into it, it's actually pretty decent, but it's not at the level of, I would say, the current GPT-4, with the exception of the recent Llama 405B.
Right. So I guess given that, like, what are the parameters that go into judging a judge?
So in terms of judging a judge, typically there's from my perspective, there's two main criteria. So one is basically if you have a list of models and you basically create some sort of ranking between all those models with using a particular judge, you want the judge basically to basically clearly separate out all those models' performance and with some level of confidence. So, for example, like if the performance of one model, if I can confidently say the performance of one model is, let's say, is average performance is 40%, and the statistic, like the standard deviation of that model is between is within a 2% range, and I have another model which is like at 35%, and it's also like within a 2% range. I can clearly say that this model is the first model is better than the second model, like pretty confidently. So we want like an LLM as the LLM as the judge model, basically to give us that kind of guarantee. And then the second aspect is okay, we want the judge actually to correspond to what humans actually think, which model is better, because I mean, even if the judge model can basically separate out the different models' performance, if it doesn't correlate to human preferences, then it's not really then that's not really telling us, kind of giving us the signal that we really want. So how we do that is we basically we have to set some idea of like a ground truth. And there are frameworks out there such as Chatbot Arena, which basically it's a large online hosted platform where basically they have models of all different, I guess, all different models, from closed source models to open source models. And basically what they do is they run this large scale kind of experiment of just showing, one model and another model and anonymizing it and asking and basically allowing users to type any kind of prompt. And then basically the users can basically choose, which model is better. And so it's mostly like it's a very driven, I
Right.
guess, platform. And basically we want our, evaluations when we use LLM as a judge to correlate to those, because we, for now at least, we've taken that as a source of ground truth.
At SambaNova, I mean, obviously we're benchmarking a ton of different models and trying to help our customers with how to think about the landscape. Um, can you talk to us about like how we're using it internally and how it's helping accelerate our development?
Yeah, so I think the we use LLM as a judge. We used LLM as a judge extensively in our kind of COE development. So, for example, just to give like a brief overview, COE or composition of experts is this approach of basically trying to um, stitch together basically a whole bunch of small models
Mhm.
with a router, basically to give you the performance of a much bigger model at basically the inference cost of like a very small model. They basically that's a one line sort of pitch of like how this specific type of architecture works. And the problem and the challenge there is basically you basically need to find out different models which are good at specific tasks, which can be non-trivial. So we can either use benchmarks, which I mentioned earlier in our talk, which can be automated and kind of choose models based on their benchmark performance, but here we have to worry about things like contamination, et cetera. So instead, what we do is we use basically LLM as a judge, and then kind of leave it to the LLM to figure out, on this particular domain, let it whether it be, for example, mathematics, coding, finance, legal. Basically, let the LLM basically evaluate, all of these different expert smaller models we have and figure out for this particular domain which expert is the best. And so basically what LLM as a judge helped us do is basically for each domain that we cared about, help to select, which expert was good, and then so we can basically build the COE.
Awesome. All of this stuff is so new to a lot of folks, and having conversations like this is incredible to help help our customers and developers globally understand all of the nuance that's happening in the space as we're actively trying to grow all of these use cases that we're seeing getting deployed. So, Ravi, appreciate the time. Is there anything else you'd like to mention and before we wrap up?
No, thanks for having me, Vasanth. It was really
Awesome.
enjoyable. Yeah.
All right, this has been a great chat, and we'll be doing these weekly. So for those tuning in, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Till then, bye.